What's up everybody and welcome to a new video. And in this video we're going to go over my notes for the keyboard shortcuts in VS Code. And in this first video we're going to cover example shortcuts. However, before we start, I want to mention some side notes. Namely, the first one is about the shortcuts reference. And you can open that, for example, here in the menu bar via help and then here keyboard shortcuts reference. And this here is the reference for Windows. So if you are on another operating system, you can check out this link here. And the point that I want to mention here is that this reference here assumes a US keyboard layout. However, VS Code automatically adjusts some of your shortcuts based on the current system's keyboard layout. So for example, this toggle line comment here, this has the shortcut Control forward space for a US layout. However, if I go back here to VS Code and then open the shortcuts, keyboard shortcuts editor, and then search for this toggle line comment, then you can see here, for me, it's actually Control #. So this is an example command where my shortcut differs from the US layout. However, for most commands, the shortcuts are the same. So therefore then throughout the video, whenever my command here differs from the US layout, I will then mention that. Okay, so then that's the first side note. And the second one is that shortcuts are also listed throughout the entire UI. So for example, if I go here to the menu bar, then you can see here are the respective shortcuts if they are available. Or if I open here the context menu in the editor, here you can also see some shortcuts. Or for example, if you hover over a button, then you can also see the respective shortcut. So if you're using a specific functionality often, then it's also quite easy to learn the respective shortcut. Okay, so those are the side notes that I wanted to mention. Okay, so now let's start with the shortcuts. And the first one is for the single most important command. Namely, it's for accessing the command palette. And this is done via Ctrl+Shift+P. So if I press Ctrl+Shift+P, then here the command palette opens. And this is the single most important command because with the command palette, you have access to all of VS Code's functionality. And here you can also see the respective shortcuts if they are available. So if you're using a specific command regularly, then you can easily learn the respective shortcut. Okay, so this is the shortcut for the single most important command. So then the next shortcuts are about accessing UI elements. So for example, here within the title bar, if you want to access this menu bar, you can simply press Alt. So if I press Alt, then the focus is here on the menu bar. And then you can use the arrow keys to move around in the menu bar. And then if you want to go back to the editor, simply press Alt again. So now I'm back in the editor. Then here for those layout controls here, you can toggle the primary sidebar with Ctrl+B. So if I use Ctrl+B, I can toggle the primary sidebar. With Ctrl+Alt+B, I can toggle the secondary sidebar. And with Ctrl+J, I can toggle the panel. Okay, so then next we have the activity bar. So to access those elements here, we have these respective shortcuts. So to access the Explorer, you can press Ctrl+Shift+E. To get to the search, Ctrl+Shift+F. For source control, Ctrl+Shift+G. For the debugger, then Ctrl+Shift+D. And for extensions, Ctrl+Shift+X. And then here I also have some additional information for the Explorer. Namely, you can use the arrow keys for navigation. So if I go back to the Explorer with Ctrl+Shift+E, and then here use the up and down arrow keys, you can move the focus around. And if you are on a folder, then you can use the right arrow key to unfold that folder or the left arrow key to fold it again. And then here an additional option is that you have, let's say here you're on this third file and then you move back up to this MISC folder. Instead of moving manually up, you can simply press the left arrow and then it automatically jumps to the respective folder. So that's this first additional option. And then the second one is here that you can press the first letter or letters of the respective file and folder to focus it. So for example, let's say you have a bunch of folders open. And now let's say you want to go to the README, then you can simply press R and then it directly jumps to the README. Or if you want to jump to the demonstration examples folder, you can press D and then you get to that. And then an additional option is that you can also use multiple letters. So for example, if I go back to the README, and now let's say I want to jump to the div editor, what you can do is, or could do is press D, then wait for a moment, then press D again, and then wait for a moment, and then press D again to jump to the div editor. Or what you also can do is to simply press DI and then you jump directly to the div editor. Okay, so those are those additional options for the Explorer. And then I also have some additional options for the search. So here you can access the replace functionality with Ctrl-Shift-H. So if I press Ctrl-Shift-F, then I get to the search. And if I press Ctrl-Shift-H, then I can toggle the replace functionality. And then with Ctrl-Shift-J, you can toggle the search details. So if I press Ctrl-Shift-J, then I can toggle those search details here. And then lastly, with F4 or Shift F4, you can focus the next or previous search result. So for example, if I search here for test and now press F4, then I jump here to this first search result. If I press F4 again, then I jump to the next result. And if I press Shift F4, then I can get to the previous search result. Okay, so let's close here those files and then go back to the notes. So these are the additional notes for search. And here I also then have a side note. And this states that if you press the respective shortcut again, then you can return the focus to the editor. So for example, if I press Ctrl-Shift-E, then I get to the Explorer. And now if I press Ctrl-Shift-E again, then I get back here to the editor. And this works for all except for the search. So for example, if I press Ctrl-Shift-F to get to the search and now press Ctrl-Shift-F again, then it doesn't jump into the editor for whatever reason. Okay, so this is the side note. And for that, now we covered all the shortcuts that I want to mention with respect to the activity bar. So then the next shortcuts are for the editor. Namely, if you want to focus the first, second, and so on editor group, then you can use Ctrl 1, 2, and so on. So to show that, let's open another editor group. So therefore, let's open here this file to the side. And now we have focused this second group. And if you want to focus on the third group, the first group, then you can press Ctrl 1. And if you want to go to the second group here again, you can press Ctrl 2. And then here I also have some additional information. Namely, if the number doesn't exist, then a new empty editor group is created. So for example, if I press Ctrl 3, then it creates this new empty editor group here. And then also, if you press Ctrl 0, then the focus goes into the sidebar. So if I press Ctrl 0, then you can see here the focus goes into the sidebar. Okay, so that's the first shortcut I want to mention. And then here the second one is that to focus the first, second, and so on editor in an active editor group, you can press Alt 1 and 2 and so on. So for example, to show that, let's open here more files. And now to focus this first file, you can press Alt 1. And to focus the third file, you can press Alt 3. And here I also have some additional information. Namely, you can cycle through the editors with Control Tab. So if I press Control Tab, then this drop-down list here opens with all the files of the currently active editor group. And then here you can switch to other files. And what this list does is it lists the recently opened file, the most recently opened file first. So the last file that we opened was basic functionality. That's why it was listed first. And so because of this behavior, then you can easily switch back and forth between two editors. Okay, so those are the shortcuts for the editor. And then here next we have shortcuts for accessing elements in the panel. So for example, to access the properties view, you can press Ctrl-Shift-M. To access the outline, the output view, you can press Ctrl-Shift-U. To access the debug console, Ctrl-Shift-Y. And then here to access terminal, I have this command control and then this character, and that's because I have a German layout. So the US equivalent would be Control backtick. And with Control backtick, I mean this character. I didn't just use it here because it has a special meaning in this markdown syntax. Okay, so now let's here access the terminal to show that it works. So those are the commands for accessing the elements in the panel. And then here I have some shortcuts for accessing some miscellaneous UI elements. For example, the settings you can access with Control, and then the keyboard shortcuts editor can be accessed via Control K, Control S. So simply hold Control and then press KS. So this opens then the keyboard shortcuts editor. And here I also have some side notes. And the first one is about switching between the input control and the result. And you can do that with control up arrow or down arrow key. So for example, if I go here to the extensions, then the focus is currently in this search field. And if I want to go to those extensions, you can press then control down arrow. And then the focus is within those extensions. And if you want to go back to the search field, you can press control up arrow. So then the focus is again here. So that's the first side note. The second one is then about toggling tab navigation, which you can do with control M. So if I press control M, then here it's indicated that this tab navigation is activated. So here now it says tabs. The tab moves the focus. And with that, you can then use tab or shift tab to focus between the different UI components of this window. So if I press tab, then the focus now goes to this heading here. And if I press it again, then it goes to the status bar. If I press it again, then I'm now at these arrows here, then in the command center, and then here in the layout controls. And if you use the arrow keys, you can also move around the different elements of the respective UI component. So with this command, you can access then basically all the elements that don't have a default shortcut. Okay, so then to toggle it off, you can press Ctrl M again, or simply click here this button. And then the next side note is that to focus the next or previous element, you can use F6 or Shift F6. And what this does is then it cycles the focus between the editor, panel, status bar, activity bar, and then primary sidebar. So to show that, let's open the panel. And now if I put the focus here on the editor and then press F6, then I get to the panel. If I press it again, then I get to the status bar. Next, I then get to the activity bar. If I press it then again, I get to the sidebar. And then lastly, if I press it again, I get back to the editor. Okay, so those are those side notes. And with that, now we've covered all the shortcuts that I wanted to cover with respect to accessing the different UI elements. So then the next shortcuts are for file or editor management. So here, if you want to open a file, you can press Ctrl P. So this opens this go to file functionality, which we've talked about in the previous video. So if I want to open this file, I can then press simply enter. Alternatively, you could also open the File Explorer with Ctrl O. So if I press Ctrl O, this opens then the native File Explorer. Or you could also simply use this Explorer of the VS Code. So to access that, Ctrl Shift E. And then here go to another file and then open it this way. Okay, so this is how to open a file. Then to open a folder workspace, you can press Ctrl K, Ctrl O. So if I press Ctrl K and then O, then here you can select the respective folder that you want to open. And then here you can also open recent via Ctrl R. So this lists then the recently opened folders and files. And this is especially useful if you want to switch between different workspaces. So for example, if I go here to this Python workspace, and now if I want to go back to the VS Code tutorial, I can press Ctrl R and then here select VS Code. And then I'm back to my VS Code tutorial. Okay, so then next we have create new file or editor. So this you can do with Ctrl N. So if you press Ctrl N, this creates a new file. If you want to create a new window, you can press Ctrl Shift N. So Ctrl Shift N opens then here this new window. Then we have save. So if you want to save a file, this is simply Ctrl S. So if I make here a change, now this file is unsaved. And if I save it with Ctrl S, then the start here again disappears. Then you can also save the file as with Ctrl Shift S. So if I press Ctrl Shift S, then you can save the file as another type. And to save all, you can press Ctrl K and then S. So for example, if I again here make a change in this file, and then also a change in this file. And now if I want to save all the files, I can press Ctrl K and then S. So this then saves all these files. Then next we have close. So to close the file or editor, you can simply press Ctrl W. So if I want to close this, I can press Ctrl W. If you want to close a window, then you can press Ctrl Shift W. So if I open a new window with Ctrl Shift N, and then now if I want to close it, I can do it via Ctrl Shift W. Then to close all the editors in a group, you can use Ctrl K W. So therefore let's create another group. And let's add another file to that. So now if I want to close this group here, I can press Ctrl K and then W. And if you want to close all editors, you would then press Control K, Control W. So therefore, again, let's put this over here. And now if I want to close all the editors, Control K and then W. So let's open the notes again. And then lastly, if you want to close a folder or workspace, you would use then Control K and then F. So Control K and then F. This closes then this folder. And now to open, for example, our VS Code folder, we can again use Control R and then here select our VS Code tutorial. So that's closing. Next we have splitting the editor. So this is done via Control and this uptick here. And this is again different because I have a German layout. For the US, this would be Control \. So if I press Control and this uptick, then we can split it to the right. If you want to split it up, then you would press Control K, Control uptick. And here again, for US, we would then do Control K, Control \. So let's press Control K and then uptick. So this splits then the editor up. Okay, so this is splitting. And then lastly, we have here moving. So if you want to move the editor tab left or right, then you can do that via Control Shift page up or page down. So therefore, let's open here more files. And if I want to move this tab here around, I can then press Control Shift page up or page down. Then if you want to move the editor into another group, you can do that via Control Alt and left or right arrow. So for example, if I put this file over here, now if I want to move this file into this editor group, I can press Control Alt and right arrow. And if I want to back to this left group, I can press Control Alt left arrow. And then lastly, to move an active editor group, press Control K and then the respective arrow key. So for example, if I want to move this editor group down, I can press then Control K and then the down arrow. So this moves it down. And if I wanted to move it back to the left, I would then press Control K and then left arrow. Okay, so those are all the shortcuts that I want to mention with respect to file and editor management. So then the next shortcuts are for the editor. And here let's first cover basic editing. So to cut, copy and paste, you would use Control X, Z and V. And to show that, I've prepared here a Python file. So now let's say we want to cut this print statement here. Therefore, simply highlight that and then press Control X. And then if you want to paste it here, for example, at the bottom, press then Control V. And here, just as a side note, if the selection is empty, i.e. if the cursor is on this line here somewhere, and then you press Control X, then it simply cuts the whole line. And then if you press Control V, it pastes the whole line. Then next, you also have undo and redo with Control Z and Control Shift Z. So for example, if I press here Control Z, then this print statement is cut again. And if I press Control Z again, then it's pasted here at the bottom. And then to redo that, simply press Control Shift Z. Then the next is move line up or down. So this you can do with the Alt plus up or down arrow. So for example, if I put the cursor on this line and then press Alt and down arrow, I can move it down. If I press the up arrow, I can move it back up again. Then you can copy a line up or down with Shift, Alt and then up or down arrow. So for example, if I press Shift, Alt and the down arrow, then it copies this line down. If I press Shift, Alt and up arrow, it copies the line up. Then we have insert line in below, insert line below or above. And this you can do with Control Enter or Control Shift Enter. So therefore, let's for example say the cursor is on this for loop statement here. And now let's say we want to add another line before this numbers.append statement. One way you could do that is by going to the end of this line and then pressing Enter. Or you could simply press Control Enter and then insert the line below. Or the other way around, if the cursor is on this line, then you can press Control Shift Enter and insert a line above. And then here, the next one is to indent or outdent a line. So this is done via Tab or Shift Tab. So for example, if I press Tab, then I can indent this line. If I press Shift Tab, then I can outdent this line. So then next we have fold and unfold. So you can fold and unfold a region by pressing Control Shift and then the special character. And here again, this is German character. So for the US layout, you would press Control Shift open brackets or closing brackets. So to show that, I've prepared here a markdown file with some nested lists. And now let's say we want to fold this first nested list here. Therefore, you would then use Control Shift and open brackets. And if you want to unfold it again, then Control Shift closing brackets. So that's folding a region. Then to fold all subregions, you would then use Control K, Control open brackets or closing brackets. So for example, let's say you wanted to fold all those regions here. Then one way you could do that is by folding them individually, or you can simply fold all the regions by pressing Control K, Control opening brackets. And then here, if I unfold this, you can see everything is folded. And if you want to unfold all the subregions, then you would press Control K, Control closing brackets. Okay, so that is that command. So then next you can also fold and unfold all. So this you do by Control K, Control 0. So if I press Control K, Control 0, then I'm unfolding all. And if I press Control K, Control J, then I'm unfolding everything again. Then you can also fold to a specific level. And therefore you would then use Control K and then Control and then a specific number. So for example, let's say we wanted to fold these nested lists here to level 5. This you would do then with Control K and then 5. And here, however, you can't unfold again. So for example, if I press Control K, Control 7, then it doesn't unfold here. And then another side note that I want to mention is, for example, if we now fold to level 1 by pressing Control K, Control 1, then it doesn't fold this first nested list here, and that's because the cursor was within this folding range. Okay, so then lastly, what you can do is also fold and unfold marker regions. So we talked about marker regions in a different video. So now let me just show you how that works. Therefore, let's unfold everything again with Control K, Control J. And then let's insert here this marker around this first nested list here. So the second marker is then end region. And now what you can do is here, now you can fold this region where you then fold away this first nested list. And you can do that also with the keyboard shortcut by pressing Control K, Control 8. And to unfold it, then Control K, Control 9. Okay, so this is folding. Then next we have IntelliSense. So to access the member list, you can press Control space. So if I go here to the Python file again, then press PR and then Control space to get the member list. And then to see the quick info, simply press Control space again. So this way you can toggle on or off the quick info. Then to see the parameter hints, simply go into the parentheses and then press Control Shift space. So this way you can then see the parameter hints. And to show the hover, you would then press Control K, Control I. So if I put the cursor here on the print statement and then press Control K, Control I, then I get this hover here, so this tooltip. Then next we have here these code actions. So for example, if I type here sample and call this function, then if I put the cursor here on the sample function, then you can see this light bulb here. And to see those code actions, then you can press control period. So if I press Control period, then we see here the available quick fixes. So that are the code actions. Next we have format. So to format the document, you would press Shift, Alt and F. And to show that, I've prepared here a JavaScript file with those two for loops. Now let's format this document by pressing Shift, Alt and F. Then you can see those for loops were formatted. So let's undo this again with Control Z. And to format the selection, simply select, for example, the second for loop and then press Control K, Control F. So Control K and F, then we are only formatting this selection here. Then next, you can also toggle line comments with Control pound symbol. And in the USC layout, this would be then Control forward slash. So for example, if I highlight this code here and then press Control pound symbol or forward slash, then you can comment out those lines. Or with Shift Alt and A, you can create a block comment. So if I press then Shift Alt and A, then I have here this block comment. Okay, and then lastly, here there are some side notes. The first one is about renaming a symbol, which you can do with F2. So for example, if I put the cursor here on numbers and then press F2, then I can rename this variable. So let's call this here, for example, list of numbers. Then it gets renamed here in this file. Then with F9 you can toggle breakpoints. So if I press F9 you can toggle the breakpoints on or off. And then lastly, to show the editor context menu, press Shift and F10. So if I press Shift F10, then I get here to open this context menu, which you normally get with the right clicking. Okay, so those are all the shortcuts that I want to mention with respect to basic editing. So the next are shortcuts for code navigation. And here the first is about moving the cursor. So if you want to move it to the beginning or end of a line, press Home and End. So for example, if I put the cursor here on this line and then press Home, then it jumps to the beginning of the line. And if I press End, then it jumps to the end of the line. And if you want to jump to the beginning or end of the file, then press Control Home and or End. So if I press Control Home, then it jumps to the beginning. If I press Control End, then it jumps to the end. Then to move the cursor one word to the left or right, you can use Control plus left or right arrow. So for example, if I put the cursor here and then press Control right arrow, I jump across the words. And if I press left arrow, I jump across the words in the left direction. Then here we have moving the cursor back or forward with Alt plus left or right arrow. So this represents those navigation controls here. And here, for example, if I follow this reference link, and now if I want to jump back up, I can use this Alt plus left arrow. So I can jump to the previous position. Then next we have moving the cursor to a matching bracket with Control Shift and this uptick here. And for the US layout, this would be Control Shift plus backspace. So to show that, I've prepared here some code. So if I now put the cursor here next to this bracket and want to jump to this one, then you would use then Control Shift backspace, or in my case then Control Shift uptick. So then I jump to this bracket, and if I want to jump back, I can simply press that again. Okay, so this is that. And then here you also have a side note, which is to move the cursor to the next or previous symbol highlight. So for example, if I put here the cursor on code, and then I want to jump to the next instance of code here, I can simply press F7 and then it jumps to this code instance here. And if I press it again, then it jumps to this one. And if you press Shift F7, then you can move backwards. Okay, so this is the side note. Then next we have scrolling. So if you want to scroll a line up or down, simply press Control up and down arrow. So if I press Control down arrow, I can scroll down. If I press up arrow, I can scroll up. Then you can also scroll a page up or down with Alt, page up and page down. So for example, if I just press a page down, then the cursor actually jumps down here. However, if I press again page up, if I press Alt plus page down, then you simply scroll down while the cursor stays here at the top. Okay, so then next we have here this command center functionality. So here you can access the go to line functionality with Control G. So here you can then specify to which line you want to jump. Then to get go to symbol and file functionality, press Control Shift and O. So with this, then you can jump to a respective symbol within the file. And if you want to go to a symbol in the workspace, press Control T. So with that, you can then jump to a specific symbol within the workspace. So next you can access the search functionality with Control F. And if you want to access the replace functionality, simply press Control H. So then next we have the breadcrumbs. So you can access those with Control Shift and period. So if I press here Control Shift period, then it toggles on those breadcrumbs. And then here with the arrow keys, you can then navigate those breadcrumbs. And then lastly, we have here zoom in and out. So for the US layout, this would be Control plus equal sign or minus sign. And for me, that is Control and plus to zoom in and Control and minus to zoom out. Okay, so those are the shortcuts that I wanted to mention with respect to code navigation. So now let's go over the shortcuts for selections and multiple cursors. So here the first one is to select the current line with Control L. So for example, if I put the cursor here on this line and then press Control L, then I can select the whole line. And if I press it again, I can also select those following lines. Then next we can select all occurrences with Control Shift L. So for example, if I put here the cursor on this list of numbers variables and then press Control Shift L, then I select all the occurrences of that variable. Then next we can add the next occurrence to the selection with Control D. And here I also have a side note, namely if the selection is empty, then the word that the cursor is on is selected. So for example, if I put the cursor here on list of numbers and then press Control D, then this variable here is selected. And now if I press Control D again, then the next occurrence of that variable is selected to is added to the selection. And if I press it again, then we also get this third occurrence here. And then here, let's say that you don't want to select all three of those occurrences, but only the first one and the third one. The way that you would do that is with this move last selection to next occurrence command. So for example, if I again press Control D to select this first instance, and then press Control D again to select the second instance, and now I can use here Control K and Control D to move that last selection to the next occurrence. So to move this selection from this occurrence to this one. And this way then we have selected the first and the third instance of this variable. Okay, so now here you can also undo the last cursor operation. So again, let's say for example we use Control D to select this list of number and then the next one, and then also we accidentally selected this third one, but let's say we don't want that, then you can undo the cursor operation with Control U. Okay, so that's that. Next we have here shrink and expand selection with Shift, Alt and left or right arrow. So for example, if I would Shift Alt and then press the right arrow a couple of times, then I can expand the selection. And with the left arrow, I can shrink it again. Then here you can insert the cursor at the end of each line selected with Shift, Alt and I. So for example, let's say I highlight those variables here and then press Shift, Alt and I. This then adds here the cursor at the end of each line, and then you can maybe make some changes to that. So that is that command. And then lastly, we have insert cursor above or below. And you can do that with Control, Alt and then up or down arrow. So for example, if I put the cursor here and then press Control, Alt and down arrow, I can add it to the next line. And if I press Control, Alt and down arrow to the next one, I can also add a cursor to the third line. So then here you can maybe also make some changes to those variables. Okay, so those are all the shortcuts that I want to mention with respect to selections and multiple cursors. And with that, now we've covered all the shortcuts that I want to mention with respect to the editor. So then next, let's cover the shortcuts for the integrated terminal. So therefore, let's open it. And then here the shortcuts are, for example, to scroll to the previous or next command with Control up arrow or down arrow. So therefore, let's run some commands. So let's simply say git -h and conda-h. And now to jump to the previous command, I can use Control up arrow. And to jump to the next command, I can use Control down arrow. Then you can also scroll to the top or bottom with Control home and end. So if I press Control home, then I get to the top. If I press Control end, then I get to the end. Then you can scroll a page up or down with Control Shift page up or page down. So if I press here, then Control Shift page up, then I can scroll page up. And if I press pages down, I can scroll the pages down. And to scroll a line up or down, you can press Control Alt and then page up. So Control Alt page up scrolls down line by line. And with page down, you can scroll down line by line. Then next, you can create a new terminal with Control Shift and backtick for the US layout. So if I run this here, Control Shift and then backtick, this then creates a new terminal. Then you can split the terminal with Control Shift and 5. So if I here press Control Shift 5, then it splits this terminal here. Then to focus the next terminal group, you can press Control and page down. So for example, right now we are focusing this terminal group. And if you want to focus this one, we can then press, for example, Control page down. You can also press Control page up to get to the previous terminal group. Then to focus the next terminal in the terminal group, you can press Alt down arrow. So for example, if you go back to this terminal group here, and now if you want to go back or want to move to this terminal here, we can then use Alt plus down arrow or up arrow. So if I press up arrow, I get to this one, and you can also use the down arrow to switch then between those two terminals here. Then you have the command to go to recent directory with Control G. So this way you can then go to respective directories. And then here lastly, you can open detected links with Control Shift O. So what this does, it opens a searchable quick pick with all detected links, including word links. And we talked about this in another video, so I will put the link to that into the video description. But now let's just here run, for example, the command ls. And now if I run this Control Shift O, then it opens here these detected links. For example, then you can open here this readme with this command. So this way then you open the readme, and this is the last command. So with that now we've covered all the commands that I wanted to mention with respect to the integrated terminal. So then lastly, let's go over the side notes here. And the first one states that you can exit whatever you have triggered with escape. So for example, if I trigger here IntelliSense with Control Space, and if I want to exit this again, you can simply press escape. Or if you have here multiple cursors with Control Alt and down arrow, then you can also exit those with escape. Okay, so that's the first side note. And then the second side note is that other key mappings can be installed via extensions. So for example, if you go here to extensions and then filter, category, and then key maps, then you can see here other key map extensions. Okay, so now with that, we've covered all the notes that I wanted to cover with respect to example shortcuts. So we've reached the end of this video, and then in the next video we will go over the notes for the keyboard shortcuts editor. So thanks for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.